I remember I listened to this interview with Mr. Wonderful. I don't ever remember his real name, but he's from Shark Tank, and he had worked for Steve Jobs for a couple of years. And he tells this story about how Steve Jobs would wake up every single day and he would identify what the signal was versus the noise. And so what are the three things that he has to accomplish every single day? He was very clear about what those three things were, and everything else was noise. And I think that as we go through this journey of our life, there is a lot of noise. There has never been more noise in our life than there is right now. And you can go on social media and you can consume a bunch of stuff. You can read all these great books, and it's hard to decipher what the signal is versus the noise. And that's myself included. As I work through the mental game, there is so much out there for us to consume and for us to apply that it almost feels like we're everywhere. And to be everywhere is to be nowhere. And all I'm trying to do in this journey with SIP is to figure out what exactly is the signal. And today I want to talk to you about morning pages. And if you've been here, you know what morning pages are, or at least you've heard of them. But I want to make a full podcast about morning pages, but more importantly, about what I see with athletes who are doing the morning pages. I have athletes that are extremely bought into morning pages who never miss a day. And I have athletes who I can't get them to do the morning pages. I have athletes who have done the morning pages and abandoned the morning pages. And over this time of teaching the morning pages now for over a year, I have noticed a lot with these athletes. And I think it's just something that you all would appreciate and take something away from. So, first off, what are the morning pages? I got the morning pages from Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way. And my experience with the morning pages was I was in a job where I was not very happy, and I felt kind of handcuffed into being a version of myself that maybe wasn't completely authentic. And I came across the book The Artist's Way, who I think I found it through Doechii. If you guys know who Doechii is, she's a female rapper, and she's a savage. But she talks about how she went through the artist's way, and it completely transformed her life. And my first morning pages ever were done on a vacation in Hawaii. And I just started the artist's way. I started doing the morning pages, and it was really challenging for me early on. But I just showed up to the page every single day. And that's something that you're going to continuously hear me say. Just show up to the page. And I showed up to the page and I'd write about the same things every day. And I was super critical about what I'd write. And that's not really what the morning pages are about. But I ended up looking at these morning pages 7 months later, and I looked up, and all of a sudden I was out of this job from where I was unhappy, and I was starting my own business. I had completely transformed my life. And I look back at my journals. This is now my fifth morning pages journal. And everything in my life has transformed over those pages. And so, as we talk about signal versus noise, the morning pages is absolutely one of those things that I would consider as signal. It's one of those things that moves the needle. It's one of those things that actually is transformative. I think it's arguably the most transformative habit that anybody could implement. And the funny thing is it's probably the simplest habit. We're going to get to what it is in a minute, but there's a message in that. A lot of the times, the things that are the most effective are the things that are the simplest. So what are morning pages? Morning pages from a 10,000-foot view are 3 pages every single day. This is stream of conscious writing. So simply put, you put your pen on the paper and you just write. And if you have nothing to say, you write, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say until you have something to say. Drake's having me write 3 pages and I think these are stupid. Well, that's something to write. So you're writing stream of consciousness, like you're just letting it flow. It happens within the first 45 minutes. Now, if you can't do it within the first 45 minutes, whatever. There really are no rules, but I recommend doing them in the first 45 minutes. That's how Julia Cameron sets them up. And the reason you would do them in the first 45 minutes is your walls are down, your ego is down, the self-one voice is quiet. And so in those first 45 minutes, it's a whole lot easier to allow your unconscious to come through. You have less resistance, you have less walls. But if you can't, do what you can, right? If you have to do your morning pages a couple hours later, okay. If you can't do your pages until nighttime, okay. I think a lot of people will find excuses for why they can't do them, and I'm just looking at you trying to say, just show up to the page and just do them every single day. And if it's not in the first 45 minutes, whatever. But if you're one of those people that tries to do things, the most intentional, the quote unquote right way, I would encourage you to do them within the first 45 minutes. And I highly recommend that you do them for 3 pages. And then the only other rule there is that you can't read them. In the artist way, I believe she doesn't let you read them until week 8. And I highly recommend that you don't open the journal and read them because you are still sensitive to what you're writing, especially in those first 8 weeks. And so you might go back and read what you've been writing and just kind of cringe and not want to do them anymore. So during this quote unquote creative recovery, as Julia Cameron talks about, it's important that you protect your inner artist. You don't put your inner artist in situations to take criticism from people that are, not in your inner circle. And so again, the morning pages are not something you share. They're not something you read. It's just something where you show up every single day and you write 3 pages, stream of consciousness in the first 45 minutes. The only other rule is that there are no other rules. Just write. Write about what you ate for dinner last night. Write about relationship struggles. Write about your struggles in your sport. Write about the things you're grateful for. There's no rules. Just write. And so that's it. 3 pages every single day. I wrote down that speed defeats the censor. The censor is the voice in your head, and we're going to get to this in a minute, that lies to you. And as you do the morning pages, you're going to become more aware of what that voice sounds like, who that voice is, call it self one. And when you don't pick the pen up off the paper and you just write, remember that speed defeats the censor. I wrote down here that it's a really good opportunity to learn to let it happen. As we talk about self one and self one wants to calculate. And so your whole life journaling, I think it's fair to say that there's a good chance that you had expectations for what the journal was quote unquote supposed to be. And that handcuffs you, it removes spontaneity. And so this is freeing you from any preconceived notions of how journaling is supposed to be. You're literally just writing. Self two is the mind that just lets it happen. You just flow. And so I want you to practice letting it happen by just putting the pen on the paper and going. And so now I have five different reasons that you should be doing morning pages, or I guess 5 different takeaways from what the morning pages really are in my own words. So number one, I think the morning pages are an opportunity to brain dump. You have all this stuff going on in your head every single day, and very rarely do we give ourselves a chance to slow down and to just process it. And again, in a world where information is so abundant, focus is the art of knowing what to ignore. In a world where you're being constantly overstimulated, it pays to be still. So with that being said, it's a brain dump. I love to think about your brain as this beautiful computer. It is a computer, obviously. And when you have a computer with 1,000 tabs open, the computer runs slower. Think about your phone. When it has all the tabs open, your phone runs slower. It's the same thing with your mind. And so as we're doing these morning pages, we are starting to dump. And as you dump, you are clearing out that mind. I think about Naval Ravikant. There's the book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I always talk about Naval, but he says all the time that 99% of man's problems, they stem from the inability to sit with themselves for 60 minutes straight. He also talks about in this 60-minute sitting with yourself meditation, what's happening in that process is a lot like a filing cabinet. You've just shoved papers in this filing cabinet for all these years, and over time, it might take months. You're slowly, one by one, filing these papers in a way that is organized. Your brain is a filing cabinet. You're slowly filing them through your morning pages. And so again, 99% of man's problems, they stem from the inability to sit with yourself for 60 minutes. Morning pages is a different font of that. You are sitting with yourself and you're allowing yourself to file the papers in the cabinet. You are allowing yourself to close the tabs on your computer. Now, the next point I wrote on the brain dump is just that your mind is a creative Eden. And we've talked about that before. You've heard me say that. The Garden of Eden is in Genesis, is in the Bible, and there's Adam and Eve, and there is a serpent that slithers around that garden. That serpent is the devil. It is Lucifer, and the devil is beautiful. The devil is deceitful. The devil gets them to eat the apple, you know the rest. But what I'm trying to explain here is we should view our mind as a garden. And when you are doing these morning pages, you are pulling the weeds from the garden, but you're also learning to recognize when that snake is slithering around and what that snake is saying. So again, the snake is the serpent. The snake is the censor. And in the Bible, it talks about how the devil was made out of instruments, literally beautiful. The first sin ever was pride. The devil got to look at himself and realize how beautiful he was. He became prideful. And so the reason I share that is as you write your morning pages, there's going to be this voice that you're slowly going to recognize that is that serpent, that it looks like it's helping you. It's that voice that tells you, oh no, you shouldn't be doing this. This is stupid. Why are you wasting your time? You should be doing something that's productive. It's that voice that looks at you and says, no, you shouldn't record a podcast because you might embarrass yourself. It's that voice that tells you, hey, you shouldn't put yourself out there because you're going to look like an idiot. And you're like, oh man, that voice is looking out for me. No, that voice is not you. And the moment we can start to recognize that is a very empowering thing. So again, brain dump. We're closing the computer tabs, we're filing the papers in the filing cabinet, and we're pulling the weeds from the garden. Now, my second point ties straight into this idea of the serpent in the garden. We are learning to be the observer. Shout out to Power of Now, but you are not your mind. I think that is probably the most empowering thing I've learned in the mental game. And I remember being at Arizona State as a freshman, and I just remember feeling so low, like I couldn't control my mind, and I needed to, and I had nobody that could help me. And my mind loved to tell me these things that were so disempowering, and I thought it was me. And I remember I couldn't sleep. And when I would sleep, I would have nightmares about my performance. I would see myself going out there and struggling. And I was so overly identifying with the things that were going on in my mind. And I wish I would have just had somebody tell me that I wasn't my mind and that I can learn to be the observer of my mind. And there are practical and tangible strategies to learn how to do that. And morning pages is genuinely the greatest strategy I could give you to learn how to become the observer. You learn in these pages that you're not your mind. You learn in these pages that you have these sabotaging patterns. And as you write it on the paper, you are actively detaching from these thoughts. And you are seeing these thoughts for what they are, lies. And I think it's the book of John, the Gospel of John. It says that the devil's native language is lies. And as you start to write these things down, you start to ask yourself, where did this come from? Do I even actually believe these things? And as you start to work through that process over time, naturally, you start to overcome these thought patterns. You start to realize that that's not you. And it's okay that you have those thoughts. We can recognize those thoughts. We can allow those thoughts to be there. We can investigate those thoughts and ask myself, where did those thoughts come from? Then we can nurture ourselves and take steps forward. That's the RAIN framework. Again, recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. But as we're doing this, it just gives you a real tangible way to observe what's going on and move forward. Again, you're not reading them. This is your safe space, so you're just dumping them. You put them on the paper, and you can leave them on the paper, and you can move on, compared to you just walking around all day and holding those thoughts in your head. Obviously, you could see how that would be distracting, ineffective, and just a very detrimental thing to your process. Now, my third point here is this idea of free association. Now, it's a little bit different, but what free association is, at least from what I understand, Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, they would go through in therapy, they would sit behind the individual and they'd say, what's on your mind? And this individual would just yap for, call it 60 minutes. And over time, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud would identify unconscious patterns that would come out. And then they would figure out in therapy, hey, these are unconscious patterns that are guiding your life. This is when Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, the unconscious will rule your life and you will call it fate, right? So what we're doing here is we're making unconscious patterns conscious. And how are they doing that? They're letting you just yap. And as you just yap and yap and yap and yap and yap, eventually your filter comes off. There's no filter. And you're just talking freely. You're not consciously thinking about what you're saying. And so these unconscious patterns are coming out, these unconscious tendencies. And I view the morning pages in the same way. The free association, the morning pages, they are both designed to bypass the censoring, controlling ego mind, call it self one. You are free, you are stream of consciousness writing. You are letting yourself just yap. You are bypassing this censor mind. And then we can finally discover what is going on underneath. I wrote down, let the unconscious speak. That's what this is doing. Now, my fourth thing about the morning pages is just that this is a listening process. I don't think very often we give ourselves a chance to listen to ourselves. We have all the answers inside. We have everything we need. We have the ability to regulate ourselves and to learn from our experiences, but we just have to give ourselves a chance to listen. And so if you take anything from the morning pages, just remember it's a listening process and there are no rules. It doesn't have to look a certain way. And I'm sure as you're writing and you're trying to make it look a certain way, because I've been there, well, that's something to pay attention to as well. That's an unconscious pattern as well. You have this tendency, this need to have structure. You have this tendency to have it be quote unquote perfect, to it needs to be a certain way compared to just letting it happen, letting it be whatever it is. And then my fifth reason that I think you should be doing morning pages and my fifth point about morning pages is just this idea of non-judgmental awareness. This idea I first learned from the inner game of tennis, but all non-judgmental awareness is not adding or subtracting from the facts. It's not viewing things as good or bad. And what's cool in your performance is if you can approach your craft with non-judgmental awareness, you're just collecting information, collecting data. And when you don't take this good or bad approach, it allows for spontaneity. But when everything is good or bad, you don't really give yourself a chance or space to be spontaneous. And in the inner game of tennis, he references Abraham Maslow, peak experiences, which you could just call his flow state. And he uses words like spontaneous, most here now, creative, and childlike. So present and impetuous and carefree almost, right? And so this idea of non-judgmental awareness is very applicable to the morning pages because as we move forward in the mental game, I do want you to learn how to not judge every single thing you do. Because if you're judging everything you do, you don't give your art or your performance a chance to incubate, to develop. The whole point of the inner game of tennis is that there's a natural learning process that occurs if you just keep showing up. And the only thing that gets in the way of that natural learning process is judgment. And so if we can learn to not judge everything we write down, it just makes it 1% easier to stop judging everything we do in our life. When we can remove that judgment in our life again, it gives us the ability to learn, gives us the ability to naturally learn. When you're a child, you have no judgment, right? This is like Matthew 18:3. You're completely obedient. You're completely dependent, again, dependent on the Lord, but you're also free of inhibitions and blocks. You believe easy and without cynicism. This is why when you're learning a language as a kid, you learn a language faster than you ever have because you're just observing, right? You're just observing people talking. You're just observing how people walk. And naturally, you learn to walk much quicker. You develop this skill that is really hard for a child to learn, but you develop it in a very natural way because you can't even calculate. You're an infant. You can't take instruction. So you're just observing and letting the natural learning process occur. It's the same thing with, again, learning a language. Everything you do as a child is a beautiful representation of the natural learning process because you're free of blocks. You are literally just observing, which is the process of self too, is you hold a clear image in your head and you just let it happen. And so as we go through these morning pages, I just think it's really big for us to learn to be the observer, to learn to not judge everything, to allow for spontaneity, to allow for our creative mind to guide us. She tells us in The Artist's Way that as we listen to our creativity, we are led. She also says when you listen to your creativity, you are led to your creator. And so right there, those are the reasons that you should be doing morning pages. These are all the benefits that you should be from morning pages. I love this idea of Pareto's law. What are the 20% of habits that drive 80% of your results? Well, this is one of those habits for me. And I could tell you for the athletes that I've seen have the most success and be the most consistent emotionally and in their process, They're the ones that do these morning pages. It gives them a process to show up every day and just clear to neutral. And so I just think this is one of those ones that really moves the needle. It's one of the 20% of habits that drive 80% of your results. I just told you there's 5 different things that it's doing for you that I would probably try to teach you in 5 different ways, but we're accomplishing all that in one habit. And those are the habits that we should really pay attention to and we should try to be consistent with. Now, what's interesting is people have resistance to the morning pages. I have had athletes at the highest level of sport like break down in tears from some of the takeaways that they've had from their morning pages. But you have to show up and do them. And again, the ones that are the most resistant to them are the ones that have the biggest breakthroughs. Now, I'm going to read you some notes from The Artist's Way about morning pages. I'm re-going through it and I'm on week 4. And I just wrote down some notes in my journal today about the morning pages that I want to share with you. She says, people continue to have, or I wrote this actually, people continue to have resistance to the pages. I wrote down, just keep showing up to the page. It continues to be the most transformational habit you can implement, in my opinion. Now, what does she say about morning pages? She says, we begin to sort through real feelings. These are often secret, right? Compared to the official feelings. These are on record for public display. And so as you are in your morning pages and you're not sharing them with anybody, there's no rules, you're not judging everything you write, you give yourself a chance to process the real feelings. She keeps going back to in this chapter how so many people just always are saying, "Oh, I'm okay. It's okay. I'm okay." And that is a version of numbing yourself. Like you're not actually allowing yourself to process the things you need to process and get clear on the things you need to get clear on. And so it's forcing you to confront these real feelings. The morning pages force us to get specific. At the root of a successful creative recovery is the commitment to puncture our denial, to stop saying it's okay when in fact it's something else. So what are the morning pages doing? They are pressing us to answer what else is going on. Now, this is where this gets interesting because I've seen this firsthand. I've seen it with myself as well. Many people tend to neglect or abandon the pages whenever an unpleasant piece of clarity is about to emerge. Another way I do this is like I'll be writing my morning pages and there is something that I want to write, but I won't let myself write it because I know it to be true. Like, man, I'm feeling brain fog today. I'm feeling tired, but I know why. I know why I'm feeling tired, but I don't want to admit that that's the reason why. I don't want to admit that my habits, my PM routine, the things that I'm choosing to do are the reason that I wake up feeling exhausted. Like staying up till midnight watching The Boys is probably not a good behavior for me. And so I don't want to write that. There's plenty of other examples that I don't want to write, but I know I need to. And again, back to the example about the job that I was in, I was miserable. Like I was unhealthy actually. I've told you guys I was working 80-hour weeks and literally like had to go to the doctor for my health at one point because there was stuff going on with me that was like terrible. And I wrote for all these months about how miserable I was and they're whiny. That's the thing again. Like you don't want your pages to be whiny because whiny is bad. And I agree. Like we don't want to say stupid shit out loud. I agree. These are all things that we teach. Watch your words. Be very intentional with the things you say out loud. But your morning pages is the time where you break that rule. It's a time where you dump whatever's on your mind. And so here I am not wanting to complain, but I'm like, you know what? The rules of the pages are just to show up. And so I just dump the things that are on my mind and I'm complaining about this job over and over and over again. And then one day I quit. And then one day I have my own business just like that. It's crazy how the morning pages work and it takes what it takes. But I'm not going to lie to you. There were moments in this where I'm coming up against this resistance of quitting this job and I stopped doing the pages for a couple of days. And at least I was conscious of it. At least I was aware of it because then I got back into it. But again, many times we neglect or abandon the pages whenever an unpleasant piece of clarity is about to emerge. And that's an unconscious pattern for a lot of people. I have seen this so many times with these athletes. Either they start having success and they abandon them, or they start coming up against uncomfortable truths. They don't like the morning pages. They literally say like, it was so hard and I didn't really like it. It's uncomfortable. And so they stop doing them. Right? So here's an example. You're angry. You're extremely angry, but you're not admitting it. and then we are tempted to say that we're okay. The morning pages will not allow you to get away with this evasion. It won't allow you to. I mean, maybe for a couple of days you can evade it, but eventually if you keep showing up, you're going to write about it. And so we tend to avoid these morning pages because they won't allow us to get away with this evasion. So in short, extreme emotions of any kind, the very thing that morning pages are superb for processing, are the usual triggers for avoiding the pages themselves. That's straight from the artist's way. Again, you have these extreme emotions, and this is what the morning pages are for, what they're for. They're for you to process these extreme emotions. And because you feel these extreme emotions, it's almost a trigger for you to just avoid the pages completely, even though the pages are what are going to allow you to work through these extreme emotions. So funny how human behavior is just so interesting to me. I wrote down from the artist's way, she says, over any considerable period of time, the morning pages perform a spiritual chiropractic. It's realigning you. She literally says they realign our values. I mean, you get fatigued in your life. I talk about fatigue all the time. You're tired, you're fatigued, you got all this stuff going on. It's a long season. You're struggling in the box, or as a baseball player, as a football player, maybe you're not playing enough, or every sport has their own version of this, but you got all this stuff going on and you just keep showing up to the pages, and it just reminds you of who you want to be. This goes back to our idea that you have to be reminded more than you have to be taught. You forget these ideas faster than you learn these ideas. And so again, we have to remind ourselves of these ideas. It's why I'm making a podcast on morning pages. Even though you guys have heard so much about it, I'm here to remind you that the morning pages is something that you shouldn't miss. And it's something that you should show up to every single day, and just show up to the page and allow yourself to nurture yourself. Really, all that is let yourself be nurtured. Take care of yourself. This is taking care of your mentals. So yeah, it realigns your value. I wrote down reminded more than taught. And then I got a quote for you from Joe Dispenza here. He says, if we could remind ourselves how we're not going to think, act, speak, or feel, and we could become so aware of these unconscious states of mind and body, we wouldn't let ourselves fall prey to them during the rest of our day. Anytime we do that, it's a victory. It's leading to a greater understanding about ourselves. So again, it's this idea of reminding ourselves. Now, I do want to just make a note that he's saying that we can remind ourselves of how we're not going to think, act, or speak, or feel. And so in these pages, I don't want you to be like, oh, I can't feel this way. Again, I want you to dump whatever's on your mind. But as you see this on the page, a process that I implemented, this is my own version of this, is I use, like, if you're watching this, you can see there's like a black pen and a blue pen. I will use a black pen to write my worst thoughts, my censor thoughts. And then a lot of the times I'll use my affirmations, or I'll use my blue pen to respond to these negative thoughts with things that I believe to be true, pieces of scripture, affirmations, whatever it is, more empowering thoughts. I like to respond to it with the blue. I just saw a video of Steven Adams talking about a similar process to this. He's a basketball player in the NBA. I'm going to include this video right now.
All I did was I write down exactly how I feel, and it's just raw emotions. And like whatever it is, the word, bro, I'm just writing it down. Even if it's like not even a fully made sentence. It doesn't even have to make sense. But I put that all down. And then what I do is just like, I'll stop, then I'll reread it. And then I'll respond in a different font, like a different color. And then it's the one that I read, the raw emotion, I imagine that as like a 10-year-old Stephen. And then my response is an adult Stephen. So then I'll do more of like, okay, this one's like going crazy. Again, that's more like the self-hate, like, oh, you suck and blah, blah, blah. The response is more, hey, bro, I'm actually really proud that you acknowledge this, and that. I understand it's a stressful moment. You're doing a good job. Because it's like I'm giving advice to an actual kid.
Yeah.
Because it's something that you actually do. Because a lot of us, we probably would, like if your mate comes to you and asks you for advice, you'll be very, very nice to that person. Same scenario for yourself, you probably won't, because just how, I don't know, just how the brain works, I guess. So I just, it's kind of like that. I just like remove myself and like I'm talking to a younger Stephen and giving advice. And that seemed to work out like pretty well.
Amazing. How long have you been doing that for?
I've been doing that for like maybe 6 years,
Yeah.
6-7 years.
Wow. And it consistent? Is it an everyday?
Not an everyday thing, bro. Just like I noticed myself, like when I first started, yes, like it was like a very consistent thing. And then afterwards, I was just like I was in a more comfortable spot with myself as a person and just like how I am. And yeah, from there, bro, I just like kind of do it more if I feel like that I need to work through something. If I feel myself getting there, I can feel myself getting like super emotional about this, super stressful, something. So then I'll start to hit it. Sometimes still happens before games and stuff. Like there'll be certain games where I'll just have like a lot of doubt about something. So then I'll just right before a game, boom, just go quickly, tee it out. Yeah, because you need to clear it. You need to clear all that stuff. Yeah, because then essentially it's your responsibility, mate. Otherwise you're going to let down your teammates because you have some brain fog or some stuff there. And there's ability for you to actually take care of it. But a lot of people, they take the more of the approach that I had in college, which was like, oh, just tough through it, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just strength through it. But you could use these techniques to really help you through it, you know? Just brings clarity to it instead of you just like weathering the storm. Just see what the storm is, you know?
That's brilliant. Yeah. Does anyone else, has it spread? Has anyone else seen you doing that and picked it up themselves, teammates? Or no, it's just a you thing?
Yeah, not at all, bro. Because everyone has their own thing, but I don't know, I kind of stick by the rule of like, I don't know, when teacher will show up when the student is ready, sort of buzz. Yeah. As in like, yeah, like I'm not going to, oh, hey, bro, check this out. But just like, you know, if someone asks, like, okay, yeah, bro, this is what I do. Like if you want, yeah, you could try it too.
Yeah, Stephen Adams working this process that sounds very similar to Morning Pages. And I really recommend that. You don't have to do it that way. You could just use one pen and just document or just dump everything that's going on in your head and not even respond with good things. That's okay. I just have found a lot of value in kind of working in my affirmations a little bit and working in some other things that, you know, I just like to write in my pages. And so, yeah, you can, I think this idea of reminding yourself every single day of who you want to be, becoming so aware, he says, of these unconscious states. That is what free association is. That is what the morning pages are. You become so aware of these unconscious states of mind and body. And then eventually you don't let yourself fall prey to them during the rest of your day. You stay conscious. You stay aware. You know your unconscious patterns, these unconscious thoughts, these censor thoughts. And when those thoughts come, you are conscious of them and you can renew your mind and redirect your attention to the task at hand, to truths, to just the present moment. And anytime that we're able to catch ourselves going unconscious, these disempowering thought patterns in our day-to-day life, Morning Pages makes that easier, and you bring your attention back to the present moment, that is a victory. That is a tally for being the type of person who is present. You are practicing being somebody who is conscious. You are practicing being the person that you want to be. Right? It's leading to a greater and greater understanding about yourself. My last couple points here from The Artist's Way, she says, if we are to the left or to the right of our personal truth, the morning pages will point out the need for a course adjustment. Now that takes time. It's not always like you write your pages and you're fixed. Sometimes it takes 7 months, like I said, but the morning pages will continuously point out the need for a course adjustment. We will become aware of our drift and we will correct it, if only to hush the pages up. Maybe that's the only reason why you're sick of writing about it. And so you change something. You start to realize that if nothing changes, nothing changes. That's what happened for me. I realized that for 7 months, I was writing about something that I was miserable about. And eventually I was like, man, something needs to change. And in the Artist's Way, she gives a quote from a guy named Anton Chekhov. And it says, if you want to work on your art, work on your life. And she's saying that the morning pages is doing exactly that. You are working on your life. You are working on yourself. I wrote a note that that's real self versus performer self. Shout out Bill Beswick, a great sports psychologist, but he talks about how you have a performer self with an ego, and then you have your real self, which is who you are in your life. This is disassociating the who from the do, right? This is Clark Kent to Superman. You do have your version of yourself that is Clark Kent to be a good human being, and who you are in the field is, or in whatever you're doing in your craft, is just a lagging measure of who you are in your life. And it's not always that black and white, but I've seen more often than not in the long term, it is that way. Who you are in your life does translate to who you are in the field. And so we ought to invest in our real self. We ought to try to become a more consistent and present human being. And naturally that translates to the field. You become a more consistent and present performer, in my opinion. And so again, if you want to work on your art, work on your life, this is us working on our life. This is us nurturing and working on the real self. Now, my last point here about the morning pages, before I share one text message with you, is just the idea of how much are you willing to confront about yourself? How much are you willing to confront about you? That will determine everything in your life. Everything you get in your career, the progress that you make in your life will be a direct reflection of how much you are able to confront about yourself. And that's all the morning pages are in one sentence. It's a process where you are forced to confront yourself and these things about yourself that may be disempowering. And so the last point that I'll share is that the Artist's Way talks a lot about synchronicities. You can call these God winks. It's 100 unseen helping hands that are helping nudge you on the path. It's something that you can count on as you are on the journey, right? In the book, The Alchemist, they call it omens, right? Omens. And here I am, I'm prepping for this podcast. I literally am writing this in my journal, and I get a text from my buddy, Billy Oppenheimer. Great guy, Billy Oppenheimer. Shout out Billy Oppenheimer. You should subscribe to his newsletter. He's the research assistant for Rick Rubin. He's the research assistant for Ryan Holiday. Two beautiful minds. And Billy Oppenheimer is a beautiful mind right there with these two guys. And he actually has his own book coming out soon. I already told him that as soon as his book drops, I'm going to buy a copy for every single one of my athletes and send it to them. So I think the world of Billy Oppenheimer. And that is somebody that is in my world that sharpens my mind, that inspires me. And I just am so grateful for that, because you do have to be intentional with who you're around. And I think getting to talk to Billy has been something that has like sparked my creativity for sure. But Billy sends me a text message because 2 weeks ago, he's texted me something about Julia Cameron and how she got started with the morning pages. He said, I'm just delivering my bi-weekly-ish research finding on the Artist's Way. He said, this time it's from an interview with an actor, Jeff Bridges. And here's what Jeff Bridges wrote. What does songwriting feel like for you? Well, he says, have you ever done the Artist's Way? Morning pages. The assignment is to not stop moving your pencil. And then you're not supposed to read what you wrote until maybe months later. I've done the 12-week course twice. So I've got a stack of spiral notebooks. Again, this is my 5th journal. I've got a stack of spiral notebooks. Talk about resistance. At first, it's like a homework assignment. But then you've got 3 pages and it's, oh, let me just do one more page. On a good day, writing a song is kind of like that. You just let it do you. Sounds like us saying, let it happen. You just let it do you. Let it come out. Then it feels like everything is working at once. You're hearing, you're seeing, you're smelling, you're feeling. It's pretty rare. And I find that the older I get, the less it happens to me. It's kind of frightening in a way, because it's that surrender thing you're talking about. Where's this leading me? Falling in love is like that. I'm going to open up to this person. This person is going to mean this to me. So I just thought that was a really beautiful way to talk about the morning pages, how there's resistance. It feels like a homework assignment. But once you get through the resistance, it's all of a sudden like, oh, maybe I just do one more page. And that's in anything. We're going to have an initial agitation, but eventually you fall in love with it. And there's this athlete that I have the pleasure of working with. Shout out Charlotte Corkins. Charlotte Corkins might be on a walk right now listening to this, and she hears this. Shout out Charlotte. Charlotte is the girl that is Chalant maxing. She's Chicken Joe maxing. Charlotte is a stud. She's a lacrosse athlete. But we're talking about morning pages, and it's funny how once you start doing the pages and then you stop doing the pages, you almost like feel worse. You feel worse because you're not doing the pages. This is a process that gets you back to neutral. And every athlete that I've talked to that has fallen in love with the pages says the same thing, that when they don't do them, you certainly feel an effect. And now you're not fragile and you don't need anything, but this is a process that is very effective. And it's so funny how you eventually start to feel the negative effects of not doing them. But with that being said, that's this podcast on morning pages. I just truly want to say that I wouldn't be where I am without the morning pages. SIP wouldn't be a thing without the morning pages. The first time I ever wrote the word SIP was in my morning pages, and it was actually me drawing SIP. I didn't even think it would become something. I didn't think Sip Drake would ever be something. I just knew that staying in process meant something to me. My dad also has something in his business called strategic initiative planning. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. Sip. I was like, oh, stay in process also spells out sip. Maybe I'll make an Instagram called Sip Drake and just start shit posting almost. I'll post things about the process that I love. I'll learn things that I like and I'll share it on Sip Drake. And here I am 1 year later, a little over a year later, and I've accumulated, call it over 100,000 followers, and I've created an entire business. I work with over 50 athletes at the professional and collegiate level. And my life has transformed. My girlfriend has quit her job and is full time with me. I get to work wherever I want to work. I get to do the things that I want to do. I'm in love with this life that I get to live. And it all started on one page, right? It all started with my pages. And so I just feel like I'd be doing you a disservice to not, I would be doing you a, yeah, I think the word is disservice, to not tell you how important these are. It will transform your life. But again, most people just can't break through the initial agitation. Most people just can't see it through. They can't be consistent enough. And this is one of those things, of everything I've ever told you, this is one of those things that I just wouldn't miss. I would take this very seriously. To quote, who is it? Charlie Munger, I think he says, find a very simple idea and take it seriously. This is a simple idea, the idea of showing up to the page every day and giving yourself space to just dump, giving yourself space to process and do it every single day. Expand your time horizons. And I guarantee you, I'm willing to bet everything I have to my name that if you write in your morning pages every single day for the next year, your life will look completely different at this time next year. So I love you guys. I'm grateful for you guys. Keep stacking, stay in process. I'll talk to you soon. See ya.